We begin the Gemara today on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph on the top of the Yomud. The Mishnah listed a bunch of different mitzvahs that can be done by day, and it's kosher the entire day. So the Gemara continues to bring the source for some of these things. The Egla Rufa also can be done all day. Because regarding the Egla Rufa, the Torah uses the expression of kapara, kapra lamcha Yisrael, so it's similar to all kachim that can be done all day. So how do you know that this is all day? The Chsiv zayis tia teiris ha-mitzaire b'yoyim taharasei. Kol halayla kosher l'ktziris ha'omer v'chulu. By night you cut the omer, and then it's all night. So here the Gemara is bringing the things that are all night. Dama mar, the master said, this is a Gemara in Menachos that learns it out from Sukkim, that ktzire usfire balayla, you cut the se'irim for the carbon omer by night, and you also count sfira se'irim by night, v'hava by yom, and you bring the carbon omer by day. One of the reasons that you know that it's by night is because the sfira has to be Sheva Shabbos is Temimais. In order for it to be Temimais, full 7 weeks, you have to start from the night before. Here on Chaf Amud Beis, towards the bottom, actually the last Taisvis, is one of the famous Taisvis in the Shas where he speaks about sfira se'irim, that you have to do it dafka by night, and only by night you make a bracha. And if you count by day, so Tosfos says, he brings from the Bahag that by day you count without a bracha. And if you missed by night, but you count by day without a bracha, you could continue counting with a bracha. But if you missed one day, according to the Bahag in this Tosfos, you cannot continue counting with a bracha. This is so you have the same Tosfos in Menachos, and I think in another place. This is one of the places where Tosfos says this. Let's continue in the Gemara. Lehekte chalavim ve'varim. The Chsiv, how do you know that this is all night? The Chsiv kol halayla, that you can burn it on the mizbeach all night, ad haboker, until the morning. Zeh haklal. Then the Mishnah adds the rule: davish mitzvah sebayayim. If the mitzvah is by day, kosher kol hayayim, then it's kosher the entire day. So zeh haklal. When the Mishnah says this is a rule, lasuye mai, what is it coming to add? It already says everything in the Mishnah. And for the Gemara, lasuye sidur bazichin v'siluk bazichin. On the shulchan where the lechem aponim was, so besides the lechem aponim, they had bezichin, these little bezichin that had inside levaina. So this levaina, so they would remove the old and put a new one every time they put the new bread in Shabbos. So this could also be done all day. Okay, Rabbi Yosi said, the Tanya Rabbi Yosi says, silek es hayishana shachris. If you remove the old bezichin in the morning when you took off the old bread, and then the Siddur is a Chadasha Arvis, and you only put the new Bazichin late in the afternoon, towards night. Ein bekach klum, it's okay. It doesn't have to be all the time on the Shulchan that you put the Bazichin right after you take off the old one. Omani mekayim, so what do I do with this that the Pasuk says, Lifnei Hashem Tamid? So this is not actually the Lashon of the Pasuk that it says by Bazichin. The Lashon of the Pasuk here is Lefanai Tamid, without Hashem. So it has to be constantly. So the Gemara answers, that tamid refers to the lechem aponim. That as soon as you're removing the old bread, you have to put on the new bread. But it doesn't refer to the bezichin. Even if all day there was no bezichin on it, it's fine. It's kosher to put it back on till the end of the day. Then the Mishnah said that davish mitzvah se balayla, something that the mitzvah is all night, kosher kol halayla. You can do it the entire night. So again, this is a rule the Mishnah is saying to come and add something to this. Lasuye mai. So what is this coming to add? So the Gemara, lasuye achilas psachim. This also refers to eating the carbon pesach, that you can eat it until alaysa shachar, all night. Uduloi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. This is not like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's opinion. The Tanya, it says, you should eat the meat of the carbon pesach on this night. It says here, and later there it says, so mala Allah not chatzos, just like over there. So makas b'chayris was at chatzos. Afkan, so too regarding eating the carbon pesach at chatzos. You could only eat until chatzos. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So our Mishnah here that's saying this klal that you can do the mitzvah all night is coming to add and say that he holds that even the carbon pesach you could eat the entire night, and that's how we paskin midrabanan. You don't eat it past chatzos, or maybe if we paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we try to be machmir like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Hadran alach hakoyre lemafreya. This is the conclusion of the second pedic of Masechta Megillah. Zok Heilige Mishnah. The Mishnah continues here with the halachis of reading the Megillah. Hakoyres ha-Megillah, when you read the Megillah, oimed v'yoshev. If you want, you can read it when you're standing, or you can read it when you're sitting. Kara echad, if one person reads the Megillah, karu ashnayim, or if two people are reading the Megillah together, yatsu, it'll be yaitza. In other words, you don't say that there's a problem that the sound of two voices together, you can't hear them. No, even two people read it together, you still yaitza the Megillah. Makim shenag ulevarech, in a place where the minig is to make a bracha on the Megillah, yivarech, you make a bracha. V'shalei levarech, if the minig is not to make a bracha, lo yivarech, then you don't make a bracha. As the Gemara will say, this refers to the bracha after the Megillah, not the bracha before. V'sheni, now the Gemara the Mishnah here goes on to other halachas b'chlal b'negeya to kriyas haTorah. B'sheni, v'chamishi, b'shabbos, on Monday and on Thursday, and also b'mincha, kairin, or b'sheni v'chamishi, I mean b'shabbos b'mincha that is, okay? On Shabbos by mincha time, kairin shloisha, you read 3 aliyahs. Ein peichsemehem, not less than 3, ve'im mesifin aleim. And you don't add to the 3 aliyahs. As Rashi here brings from the Gemara in Baba Kama, this is a takana that Ezra was misakin, that there shouldn't be 3 days without kriyas haTorah. So that's why this is the takana of Ezra. Yeah. Weiter the Mishnah says, ve'im aftirim ben novi, and there's no haftarah of Navi when you read on these 3 days, whether Monday, Thursday, or Shabbos, or by Mincha. HaPeseyach v'hachosim, the one that starts, that opens up, and the one that concludes, b'Torah, mevarech lefanei lachara. He makes a bracha before and after. B'Rosh Chodashim, on Rosh Chodesh, or b'Chodesh HaMoed, and when you read it from the Torah on Chol HaMoed, kairin arba. So you read 4 aliyahs. Ein peichsem mehem, not less than 4, ve'em meisifin aleim, and you don't add more than 4 aliyahs. Ve'ein maftirin b'Navi, and there's no haftarah as well on Rosh Chodesh or Chol HaMoed. HaPesach v'hachosim b'Torah mevarech lefanei lachra. You make the bracha before and after. Zeh haklal. This is the rule. Kol sheyesh bei musaf. If there's a day where there's musaf on this day, like a Rosh Chodesh or Chol HaMoed, but ve'ein a yomtiv, but it's not a yomtiv, so then kairin arba. You read 4 aliyahs. Yomtiv, on a Yomtiv Chamisha, there are 5 aliyahs. B'Yom HaKippurim, the kedusha of the day is more, so you add another aliyah, Shisha. And b'Shabbos, Shiva. On Shabbos, you have 7 aliyahs. Ein peichsem mehem. So over here, you're not allowed to do less. Aval mesifin alein. You are allowed to add more. When it comes to the Rosh Chodesh and so on, Chol HaMoed, those are days that you're allowed to work. So Rashi says, so because there's a bittul malacha, and even Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to work if it's a davar ovid, something that you'll have a loss. So therefore, you don't want to add aliyahs, so people should have to wait. But on Yom Tif or on Shabbos, when there's no working then, so you're allowed to be meisif more. Umaftirin benavi. And on these days, where from Yom Tif and Yom Kippur and Shabbos, so there's a haftarah. HaPesach v'hachosim b'Torah mevarech lefanei lachra. You make a bracha before and after. So the Gemara Tane, we learned in the Braise, Masha'en kain b'Torah. What it says in the Mishnah, it's not, this halacha does not apply to when you read from the Torah. In other words, the first halacha of the Mishnah, that when you're hearing the Megillah, you can hear it standing or sitting. When it comes to the Torah, you should stand when you hear from the Kriyas HaTorah. From where do we know this? Amar Abavo da Makra, because the pasuk says, Va'ato poi amoidi modi. The Eibusha tells Moshe Rabbeinu that you should stand over here with me. And this is when the Eibusha taught Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah after Matan Torah, the 40 days. So the Eibusha tells him to stand. So you see, when you hear Torah, you have to stand. Rabavo added to this as well that Ilmale Mikra Kosov. If the Torah would not say this, we would not be able to say such a thing. Kavayachol Afa Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'amida. When Moshe Rabbeinu hears the Torah and the Eibusha is teaching him, the Eibusha Kavayachol is also standing. Rabavo said another halacha, from where do we know that a teacher should not sit on a bed, or for that matter on a chair or whatever, sit on a higher place? And the Yishna, the Talmidav, or the Talmidah, he should teach his student, which is al gabi karka, and he's sitting on a lower place on the floor. Shanama, because the pasuk says, Va'ato poi amoid imadi, stand like me. So the teacher and the student have to be on the same level. By the way, when you get to Megillah, So the minig is that you should stand if you're able, but if it's a mashal after a fast and you're not able to stand, you're allowed to sit, like it says here in the Mishnah. Regarding Kriyas HaTorah, in Shulchan Aruch it's brought that you should stand. There is, I think, a machlokes of Pesachim about it, but it's actually a minig Chabad is that by Kriyas HaTorah you stand, by Kriyas HaTorah, unless the bima where the Sefer Torah is on is like in 770, for example, where it's a separate bima and it's 10 tvachim high from the place on the floor in the shul, so then you don't have to stand. The Rebbe in the earlier years used to stand for Kriyas HaTorah, and from after Tafshin Lamed Ches, the Rebbe used to sit by Kriyas HaTorah. It's on a bima, in a separate place, so you don't have to, that's what it's brought, that you don't have to stand. But otherwise, you're supposed to stand by Kriyas HaTorah. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in a Braisa, Mimois Moshe Vad Rabbi Gamliel, from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu until the time of Rabbi Gamliel. Lehoyu Lemedim Torah Elam Muhammad. They would learn Torah standing. Mishemeis Rabbi Gamliel. Then when Rabbi Gamliel passed away, Yorat Chayli La'olam, a sickness or a weakness came into the world. V'hoyu Lemedim Torah Miyushev. And they began learning Torah sitting. This is what it says in the Mishnah, that Mishemeis Rabbi Gamliel batel kavod HaTorah. When Rabbi Gamliel passed away, so the kavod of Torah became annulled because people began learning sitting. Now regarding Moshe Rabbeinu learning from the Eibishter in Har Sinai, so in one pasuk it says Ve'eshev Bahar, that I sat in the mountain learning Torah. Because of another pasuk it says Va'nechi amadati Bahar, and I stood on the mountain. So did he sit or stand? Amarav, so the Gemara gives a few terutzim. Rav says Oymed v'loymed, he would stand when he would learn from the Eibishter the first time, and then Yeshiv v'shayna, then he would sit and review for himself what he learned. Rab Chanina says, Lo yoimid v'lo yoshev. He wasn't standing and he wasn't sitting either. Ela sheiche, he was bending over. So therefore, it's not standing, not sitting. So once it says standing and once it says sitting. Rab Yechanan says, Ein yeshiva, over here, when it says yeshiva, it doesn't mean that he was sitting. Ela loshen hakaveh. All it means is that he was spent time there. When a person is spending time somewhere, that's also called yeshiva. Like, for example, yeshiva b'sukkah, to sit in the sukkah, doesn't necessarily mean sitting. Shenamar, like it says here, Vateshvu b'kodesh yomim rabim. And they were in Kodesh for many days, so it's just that they were there, they spent time there. Rava Amar, another teretz Rava says, Rakois, the lighter subjects, so Mu'umid, that he was able to hear and understand when he was standing. The Koshais, the more difficult subjects, Miyush, for that he had to sit to be able to learn it. Going back to the Mishnah, so it says, Korechot Karu Shnaim Yotzu, if you're hearing Megillah, even if two people are reading the Megillah together, you're Yaitza. So Tana, regarding this as well, we learned in the Braisa, Mashe Enkim B'Teira. This is not true regarding Teira. When you hear Kriyas HaTorah, you have to hear from one person. You can't hear from two together. And the Gemara brings a Braisa about this. Tana Rabbanon, so we learned in the Braisa, B'Teira, when you hear Kriyas HaTorah, so in those times they would have the Kriyas HaTorah, someone would read from the Torah, and after you read the pasuk, he read the Targum. Right, we don't do that today because people don't really know Aramaic in this way, so we don't do it. But then, so one B'Teira echad kaira, one reads from the Torah, and ve'echad metargim, and one person is metargim. You shouldn't have one person reading from the Torah, and then when you read the Targum, two should say the Targum together. Because if they say the Targum together, you're not going to be able to hear. It's two voices at the same time. It's difficult to hear. For sure, you shouldn't have two people reading from the Torah at the same time. The Braisa doesn't even say that. Navi, when you're reading from Navi, in other words, Daf Torah, Echad Kaira, so one person reads the Navi, Ushnai Metargimen. And two could be Metargim, even though it's more difficult to hear from two people. But Rashi here says that Kriyas HaTorah, so you have to hear the mitzvahs of the Torah, so you want to be sure that you can hear it clearly. Mashenkin by the Navi, where it's not mitzvahs like it is from the Torah, so over here they weren't makpit so much, and by the Targum, two people could read it together. As long as two people are not reading the Navi and two people translating. But when it comes to Hallel, so Hallel, the Gemara in Sukkah, we learned, says over there that you could have one person saying Hallel and you yaitze from the person that's saying the Hallel, or by Megillah when you're hearing the Megillah. Afila asara kaiden, even if you have 10 people saying the Hallel or reading the Megillah at the same time, va'asara metargimin, and there are 10 people that are translating, you're going to be yaitze. Rashi actually takes out the words Vasarim Targumin because he says there is no Targum for Ksuvim, there's a Targum for Teire Onkelis, and there's a Targum for Nevi'im, which is Yonis and Ben Azil. I think it was in the beginning of Masechta Megillah that it spoke about this. But for Ksuvim, there's no Targum. But I think Taisus over here leaves Targum in because he says that there were later generations that did make a Targum. We have today on the Megillah Targum Sheni, there is a certain Targumim on the Megillah as well. So the Gemara explains, my time, why by the Halal in the Megillah could you hear it from so many people at once? Kivin the Chavive, since this is something that's beloved on you, whether it's praising the Eibishter in Halal or the story of the Megillah, the nest that the Eibishter made for us, Yavidatai v'shami. So people pay attention closer and they're able to hear the voice of the person reading the Megillah. Bakim shenagul levarech yivarech. So it said in the Mishnah, if the minig is that you make the bracha, so then you make the bracha. So what was the Mishnah referring to? Amar Abaye leishano elo lachra. When the Mishnah said that it depends on the minig, this is regarding the bracha that you make after the Megillah. Avalofanel, but before you read from the Megillah, mitzvah levarech. Over there's a mitzvah to make the bracha, or another gears here is chayev levarech. You're obligated to make the bracha. Rav Yudah Mashmuel. So Rav Yudah Mashmuel said, Kol mitzvahs kulan mevarach alein over lasiyasan. All mitzvahs you make the bracha before you fulfill it. My mashma dahai over. This expression that he said over lasiyasan, which means before. How do we see that this lashon of over lishne de akdumihu, that it means before? This is something that's brought in Shas in a few places. So the Gemara brings a few sources. So Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, Amakra, the pasuk says, Vayaratz Achimatz derech hakikar. Achimatz ran on the kikar. Vayavar es akushi, and he went ahead of the kushi. So you see, Vayavar means to go ahead. Abaya mamehacha, v'hu avar lifneyem, and he went in front of them, which is actually a pasuk in the Megillah, right? Is it? No. Well, it could be in the Megillah, but this is a pasuk in Bereshis, when they went over there to greet Esav, right? So we see that avar means going ahead, in front of. By Sema, third source, Mehacha, the pasuk says, Vayaver Malcolm Lifneim, and their king goes ahead of them, Vashem Bereisham, and the Eibishter at their head. Okay, so that's the lashon of Oiver Lasiyasa, when you go ahead or before you do the mitzvah. So Lefaneha, my mevarech, before you read the Megillah, what's the bracha you make? Rav Sheshes mikatarzie ikla lekamei the Rav Ashi. So Rav Sheshes of Kartazia came in front of Rav Ashi, and ubarech, what brachas did he make? Manach, which is the Rosh Tevis of Mikra Megillah, and Sha'asa Nisim was the Nun, and the Ches is for She'echiyano. So he made the three brachas before he read the Megillah. And after the Megillah, what bracha do you make? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, harav es riveinu, v'hadon es dineinu, v'hanoikim es nikmaseinu, v'hanifra lanu mitzareinu, v'hameshalem gemul l'cholevin nafsheinu, Baruch atah Hashem hanifra liYisrael mikol tzareyam. So in this bracha, there are 5 different expressions of the Eibishter punishing the Goyim. So this is discussed in the Beis Yosef discusses this. The Meiri over here says also, what's these 5 Lashonos? So he says, because we find in Torah and Nevi'im 5 times where the Eibishter punished Amalekim, there's 5 different psukim about this, so therefore, Kenega those 5 times, there are 5 Lashonos here. Beis Yosef has another pshat. There's different ways how the Goyim come and persecute Yidden, and for each particular way, he spells it all out. So you have 5 different Lashonos here. So the Gemara now adds to this. So that he said that you finish Baruch atah Hashem Nifra liYisrael Mikol Tzareyim. So Rava says you should finish off Hakei LaMashiach, that the Eibishter is the one that helps us. Amarav Papes Hilkach Nemidin L'Tavayu. We say both Baruch atah Hashem Nifra liYisrael Mikol Tzareyim Hakei LaMashiach, like our minig is. B'Sheni u'B'Chamishi b'Shabbos b'Mincha Kairin Shloisha v'Chulu. Monday, Thursday, and by Shabbos by Mincha. So you read from three people read from the Torah. Hani Shloisha. Huh? What's the reason Mincha? If we already read yeah. Okay, it's a good question. So to Gemara, Hani Shloisha keneged me. So why 3 aliyahs corresponding to what? Amar Avasi keneged Torah Nevi'im u'Ksuvim, corresponding to Torah Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Ravama keneged Kainim Leviim v'Yisraelim. It's keneged the 3 parts of Klal Yisrael. So Elo Hadatani Rav Shimi said, Ein Peichasin miyud psukim beveis hakneses, that you don't read less than 10 psukim in shul when you read Kriyas HaTorah, so it shouldn't be less than 10 psukim. And Vayedaber oilam min aminyan. And if you're reading from a parsha and the first pasuk starts with Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe leimor, even though it's a very short pasuk and it doesn't say anything specific, but nevertheless Vayedaber is also counted as one of the 10 psukim. So Hani Asara, so these 10 psukim that you read by Kriyas HaTorah as a minimum, Keneged me, corresponding to who is this? Taisus actually brings it as an exception. The last Taisus on the page says that on Purim, when you read the parsha of Amalek, which is in Parshas B'Shalach, there's only 9 psukim in the parsha, and there you only read 9 psukim. But that's the only time. Every other time, when you read Monday, Thursday, the parsha that you read is L'chol HaPach, 10 psukim. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the 10 is Keneged Asara Batlonim Shebebeis HaKnesses, corresponding to the 10 Batlonim that are always in shul, whether they're always davening in shul or always learning in shul. Rav Yosef Amar Keneged Aseres HaDibris Shenamar LaMoshe Misinai, corresponding to the 10 Aseres HaDibris. But we don't not goydis over here. What's in the parentheses? But Rabbi Yechanan says Keneged Asara Mamare Shebehem Nivra Olam. It's connected to 10 mamares the world is created with. Hi Ninu, where are 10 mamares? Vayomer the Bereshis. It says in Bereshis there are the 10 times Vayomer that the Eibush created on the 6 days of creation. Frek the Gemara Barhani Tishuava. It only says 9 times Vayomer. And for the Gemara, Bereshis Nami Maimeru. Bereshis itself, that pasuk is also the Eibush speaking and creating heaven and earth. The Chsev B'dvaravai Shemayim Nasu. That the Eibush created Shemayim with the Eibush's words, a Beruach Piv called Tzavam. So therefore, when it says Bereshis Bara Lekim Es Hashamayim, you know that the Eibush said with his words to create Shemayim. So now we have 10 psukim, and there are 3 aliyahs, which means that you're going to have a minimum 1 aliyah 4 psukim, and the other 2 aliyahs are going to have 3 psukim. The question the Gemara is going to discuss here right now is which aliyah should be 4 psukim, the first, second, or third. If the first one read 4 psukim, so he's praiseworthy, that's good. If the second one read 4, it's also good. And if the third one read 4 psukim, it's also very good. Rashi actually says that in the simple pshat of the Gemara, it's referring to the fact if only the first, or only the second, or only the third read 4 psukim. But what's if all of them read 4 psukim is also good, even better. So now the Gemara will explain that there's a source, there's a certain milah of the first or the second or the third reading 4 psukim. Like which is the chashav aliyah? Where should you put the 4 psukim? So the Gemara brings a source for each one of them. The fact that we said that if the first one is the one that read the most, he read 4 psukim, so he's praiseworthy. So you find that the first is the most chashav by the machzas hashekel. We learned in the Mishnah in Shkalim, b'shalosh kupais, shal shalosh sa'in. There were 3 boxes that were the size of 3 sa'in, shebehan terminus alishka, and they would take out the machtas hashekel from there for the karbanis tzibur in the Beis Hamikdash. V'hayakasav aleyan, and it was written on the boxes Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Why did they write Aleph, Beis, and Gimel? Leida, to know eze mehen nitma rishain, which one was filled up first. Lahakriv mimena rishain, in order to bring the karbanis tzibur from that one first. Shemitzvah berishain, because the mitzvah is to take from the one that was filled up first. So over here you see that the first has a milah. So this first one that's reading from the Torah should read 4 psukim. If it's the middle one that read 4 psukim, so he's praiseworthy. What's the milah of the middle? So here we see regarding the menorah. The Tanya, we learned in the Braise, that it says that the candles of the menorah should be tilted towards the middle. Malama, what this teaches us is, that you tilt the other candles towards the Ner Maravi, which is the middle candle. So Rashi explains that this is going according to the opinion that says that the menorah was in the Beis Hamikdash, Mizrach Ma'ariv. Not Mizrach Ma'ariv, that is, Tzafim Darim. One side of the menorah was at Tzafim, and the other side of the menorah was at Darim. Right? If the menorah was positioned in the Beis Hamikdash, where one side of the menorah was Mizrach and one side of the menorah was Ma'ariv, so what's the Ner Maravi? Not the middle candle, the one that's closest to Ma'ariv, or it was actually the second one that was the Ner Maravi. But if the menorah is positioned Tzafin, Darim, so then none of them are closer to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. They're all in the same line. But the middle candle was tilted towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So therefore the middle one is called the Ner Maravi. And all the other ones were tilted towards the middle one, it would klapidem tzoi. Let's continue inside the Gemara. The Ner Maravi klapi shchina. The Ner Maravi, the middle candle, which is Maravi, is towards the shchina. So what do you see from here? From here you see Shem Tzoi Mishubach, that the middle of the menorah is the holiest part of the menorah. So too by aliyah, the middle one that reads most, he reads 4 psukim, is praiseworthy. Where do we see?
Which one is Ner Maravi klapi shchina? All of them are saying.
No, but the middle one, they tilted the candle of the middle one towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And as I state, that's what it says. That's why it's called Ner Maravi. If it's positioned Tzaf and Darim, so it comes out that really they're all in the same one line, but the middle one was tilted towards the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now, if the last aliyah read 4 psukim, that's also good. Mishom Mailam B'Kodesh V'Loi Meridin. You're always supposed to go up in Kodesh and not down. So he's the last one. So let him read more, going up. Rav Papa Ikla Lebei Kinishte the Avi Goiver. Rav Papa was in the shul of Avi Goiver, an individual. V'Kara Rishon Arba, and he read the first aliyah. So he read 4 psukim. V'Shapche Rav Papa, and Rav Papa praised him for reading 4 psukim. So this is before it was already designed, exactly all the aliyahs, the psukim, the way we have it today, all designed, so they would choose how much they would read. So that's what you see here in the Gemara. It was before it was established. So it said that you don't minimize, you don't add, and then it said afterwards was the lashon of the Mishnah that the one that opens and the one that closes makes a bracha before and after. So what does this mean? The one that opens and the one that closes. So the Gemara explains. Tane, we learned in Abraisa, the one that gets the first aliyah, mevarach lefanah. He makes a bracha before he reads from the Torah. And then he doesn't make a bracha when he finishes reading from the Torah. And all the other people that get aliyahs in between don't make any bracha at all. The one that finishes off and gets the last aliyah, mevarach lachareh, he makes the bracha at the end when he finishes reading from the Torah. Now the Gemara says, what's our minig? Everyone makes a bracha before and after. Viha idna, today, the kulam mevarach lefaneh lachareh, that everyone makes the bracha before and after. What's the reason for this? Hainu taime, the tkinu rabbanan, the rabbanan were misaken to do this. Gezeire mishum hanichnasen and mishum hayotzen. This is a gezeire because of people that come in late and people that leave early. People that come in late will say, look, they're not making a bracha before they read from the Torah. Or people that leave early are going to say, look, they're not making a bracha after they read from the Torah. So therefore, for those people that are not there for the entire kriyas HaTorah, Chacham were misaken to always make a bracha before and after for all the people that get the aliyah.